Let's get to the Indianapolis Colts, our third team here in the AFC South. What a year it has been for the Indianapolis Colts. Division favorites heading into 2022. We both picked them to be a top 10 offense last season.
Yes,
sort of by default. It was a bet on Frank Reich, and maybe Matt Ryan still got something left in the tank. Dead last in a weighted offensive DVOA in 2022. The worst offense in professional football.
And it's great because it's like 31st passing game, like 36 rushing game. It wasn't like
they could have been 36th, even though they're only 32.
Did I say 36?
Been 36th.
It felt like just no matter what, every stat I looked at, there's 30th, 31st, or 32nd at every single stat. Sorry, not 36th. The NFL hasn't expanded yet.
My big question with the Titans or with the Colts, the story of the Colts. What is the story around this team? Can the shiny new stuff distract from what is becoming an increasingly volatile situation?
Yeah.
They fired Frank Reich and hired Jeff Saturday to be their interim head coach. And I think wanted to give him the job. If it were up to Jim Irsay, Jeff Saturday may be the head coach of the Colts. So can you deflect from the volatility and kind of the randomness of the owner who's getting in Twitter fights with your most high profile player, who's trying to hire guys from the ESPN studio to be your long-term head coach? Can none of that matter if you hit on the head coach and Shane Steichen, who's in year one with them, and the quarterback and Anthony Richardson, who they drafted in the top 5? Because we've seen teams that feel like they are mired in just awfulness, whether it's bad ownership, whether it's the wrong people in charge. The right quarterback, the right head coach, and winning football games is a great way to distract from all of that. So can that happen for the Colts? That is my big question heading into this year.
Yeah, I said, how do they like selling their quarterback timeshares to actually buying some real estate in the quarterback market? They're like, oh, I'm gonna buy that. Okay, it's a little bit of a fixer upper, but that it's got a good base to it. It's got potential. It's got good property right there, and that's Anthony Richardson. So that's my main question. There was that tweet a few weeks ago where someone was like, "There's so much stuff that happened in the NFL season that we just forget about." The Jeff Saturday experience is one that's like that happened. Like that happened.
That definitely happened
For weeks. It happened. It wasn't just a one-off game having some coach come from week 18. It was like, no, that happened for months. That guy.
I have heard great reviews of their head coach process and their hiring process from people who were in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Had very good things to say about the state of the organization, what it felt like. So it's not like the house is burning down.
No,
I just think that there has been enough volatility with some of the owners' decision-making that he's made it harder on the people in the building. If you're Shane Steichen and you're in your first week heading into training camp and you see that tweet go out, you're the one that has to answer for that every single day about Jonathan Taylor. The owner is not answering questions every day. You have to do that. So it makes it harder for the people in the building. So even if it's a little bit of an uphill battle dealing with that, some of that stuff, can these guys overcome it and kind of restore a sense of normalcy to an organization that had drifted away from it last season? Let's be to be kind.
Yeah, we're some small sliding doors away from the AFC South having Josh McCown and Jeff Saturday as two of their head coaches,
and Urban Meyer.
I love the NFL. It's so amazing that this is all real. This is all almost happened. But
all right, I don't even know if I want to ask you this question. Talking about the offense, what is your big question about the Indianapolis Colts offense?
My big question, if I want to get like philosophical with this, is what does Shane Steichen think of his offense? Like, he adapts to his personnel? How does he adapt to this personnel? And that's my question. But really, it's when are you going to tell me to stop on Anthony Richardson? It's like, how much can my hype build about Anthony Richardson? That maybe is my question if I'm like really looking at this team, because this game, just like Trevor Lawrence during his rookie year, I don't care how the Colts finish this year. I know I'm going to be watching their all 22 every week because I just want to see the growth from that quarterback. So I don't know. I think maybe where's the limit of Nate love for Anthony Richardson is maybe the number one question that I have right now.
It was interesting being there and talking to people about what they liked about him in the process. And obviously the tools jump out to you and the testing. And he's the best athlete to ever walk through the combine as a quarterback. He's 255 now. At practice, the offensive linemen look small because they're standing next to the quarterback who's the same size as them. He legitimately looks like he's the same size as the offensive lineman.
It's like Culpepper.
It's crazy. And being there and seeing it in person, I was like, that's absolutely wild. And he made a couple throws in practice again, it's practice, but
Yeah.
they were an 11 on 11, and he just is a really talented thrower of the ball. And that, when talking to people there about what was intriguing about him, it wasn't the physical skill set in terms of athleticism. It was how natural of a thrower he was. And just the elasticity in his arm and the way he kind of moved. And you just see kind of that aspect that a lot of really good quarterbacks have. Even if the accuracy was a concern sometimes because of mechanical issues, how easy of a thrower he is, I think, is an easy sell. And so how they bring him along is the biggest question for me. How much do you try to insulate him in year one? Essentially, how run heavy is the offense? Yeah. And I imagine it being very run heavy. I don't know if it'll be quite to the level of the 2021 Eagles when they were really trying to keep things as condensed as possible for Jalen Hurts. I think it'll probably be in that zip code as they just try to protect him as much as possible. You give him some easy throws, similar to all the RPOs we've seen in Philadelphia over the last couple of years, but just really keep it condensed. And not because they don't think he can handle it mentally. He's apparently very far along. No wristband, spitting out plays in the huddle. His command is very good of the offense already, which is why I think he starts week one. Yeah. But I think it's just about knowing you don't have any super high level weapons on the outside. They're competent players, and you just make sure that you're not putting him in bad spots. So just trying to keep things as limited as possible early on and just leaning on what he can give you in the run game. That would be my guess.
And it makes a lot of sense, especially with the head coach's background. And I've talked about this before, and he's a Norv Turner guy. He's a few offenses, but he has a lot of Norv Turner. And what a lot of that offense was the heavy play action with 2-man routes and a check down, which is what Richardson ran at college a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of it at Florida, which is where you saw a lot of his highlights and his shine and his ability to layer throws and launch things 35 yards down the field that some quarterbacks would struggle at 20 yards or 15 yards. Like you said, that easy throwing motion, throwing off his back foot, throwing in a tight pocket where he doesn't even have to get his legs into it. That's where you see kind of that's the special nature of his game. But I agree with that, where I think it is going to be run heavy, hopefully with Jonathan Taylor there. But also just, that's gonna be a whole thing. As much as I like Evan Hull, but I'll talk about him in a sec. But I think that is the best way to go about it. Make it a true pick a side read, make it true play action 2-man concepts with a check down. So 2.5
1-2 run, 1-2 run, 1-2 run. And I think that they are going to do that with him.
It's gonna be great.
What is going to be fun is keeping track of all the different running game shit that they do. It's gonna be similar to Atlanta over the last couple of years, where there's just so many different moving parts. I think different structurally, which we can talk about in a second. But I think some of the things they're going to try to trot out with him are going to be pretty unique and pretty fun.
That's awesome. I mean, that's what, even though the O-line. Do you want to just start talking about the offense?
Well, so here's the structural change I think could be coming for the run game. I think this is important compared to a team like Atlanta, who's also very run heavy. I expect this team to be a run heavy team out of 11 personnel. Okay. Which is different than other run-heavy teams that we've seen around the league over the last couple of seasons, except for the Eagles. The Eagles were a high 11 personnel team, even last year being super run-heavy. And what that does is it controls for box counts. So it gives you advantageous run looks consistently. The Eagles ran the ball into an 8 or heavier man box on 36% of their early down carries last year. That was 15th in the NFL. That feels incongruous with how good the Eagles' run game is. But when you're an 11, and some of the ways that they would formationally kind of play with teams, whether it's 3 receivers on one side and a tight end, you're creating a light box for yourself immediately. So I think they're going to have a similar approach here, where we just want to make the running game as easy as possible because we're already controlling the numbers with an extra guy as the quarterback. So let's control them even further. And that would mean Josh Downs, who they drafted this year, is going to be in the slot for them. I think that's their best 11. And I think that is the best way for them to structurally run the ball. And then you create advantageous looks for Taylor, all of this different stuff. So I think from day one, the way the running game is built is automatically going to be putting them in a good position to run the ball effectively.
And I love what you're saying with the 11 personnel stuff. What's nice with their plethora of tight ends is they can get to various looks. Like they can go to a 3 tight end look if they want to get to it. They can go 12. They can live in 11. It's nice. We talk about this in the top 10 offenses pod. It's nice when this is not going to be a top 10 offense. I'm not saying anything like that, but I'm saying that offenses having that multiplicity multiple looks that, we used to make fun of that coaches would say at a press conference. It's nice to have at least where you're competent if they have to trot out some tight ends and everything. So I also think too, is you're talking about the kind of variable run game, which I'm very excited about. I think that's what a lot of teams have to do now. You can't just run outside zone. You have to run a little bit of everything these days. Also, by the way, just a sidebar, talking about how much teams are changing the run games. When I was at Rams practice, I saw the Rams running counter. I can count on my hands how many times I've seen the Rams over the last few years run counter. So just
that's coming. They know they need to be more variable.
They have to. I had a tweet about it last year. I was furious to say, you can't keep running these zone plays against these fronts. They're going to kick your ass. And they were. So even if the Rams are sprinkling and Sean McVay sprinkling different runs, I think everybody's going to do that. Even last year, though, the O-line, of course, is going to be a question mark with this offense. But having Anthony Richardson to kind of mitigate those blemishes is going to be huge. Just him as the QB run game.
Different. Can you imagine two quarterbacks further away and how they deal with pressure and leaky pockets than Anthony Richardson and 2022 Matt Ryan?
Yeah, right. And who could barely get to the ball to the sideline too, which will affect some of the receivers I'll talk about in a sec. I do have a stat for this. Matt Ryan scrambled on 2% of his dropbacks last year, which ranked 29th out of 33 qualifying quarterbacks.
Even that's
didn't have a single. I looked up. I don't have the exact number, but I think most of them were in the fourth quarter when it was like a 2-minute drill. So didn't have a single design run last year, which makes a lot of sense. It's Matt Ryan outside of QB sneaks or taking a knee. Who's going to have a lot of design runs this year is the quarterback right now in Indianapolis, not Gardner Minshew, but Anthony Richardson. Like that. That's just one way to make it just easier on everybody else. When you don't, okay, our guy can't win against this guy time after time. All right, let's just not block him and have Richardson read it. And now we're creating 7 yards when it used to be just a dead play as soon as we snapped it. It's like, that's what raises the bar about the QB's legs. Even the throwing stuff is going to be up and down, I'm sure, this year, but there's going to be plenty of highs with Richardson. I'm sure there's going to be some lows, but that QB run game, I guarantee you, out of the gate, it's going to be great. So that's where you're going to see the bar lifted with this whole team, just right then and there with Richardson's legs.
The line was a disaster last year. It was not good. There are multiple reasons. You mentioned one of them with the Richardson and just the being able to kind of change the numbers in the run game. I think there are other reasons too. One, Bernard Raymond, their left tackle, who they drafted in the 3rd round last season, was much better in the second half of the year. He was really bad in his first couple starts. That first game he played against Denver, I think that's probably the one burned into people's minds. Yes, he got much better over the second half of the year, and he wasn't ready to play. He was a 3rd round pick. He's 24, 25, I think, when he was drafted, but he hadn't played that much football. And he was a really good athlete, but his functional strength just was not there. He is much bigger and stronger this year. He's my spoiler alert. He's my breakout player for them. I think he has a chance to be a good player in year 2. So if you go from being really bad for stretches last year to even an above average left tackle, that's a huge deal. Quentin Nelson was dinged up last year. I think he will probably be better this season, healthier. And
also he's a prideful guy, by the way, Quentin Nelson. So they know what they put out on tape. So that's where I'm betting on him to come back. Even if it's 90% of what he used to be, it's still damn good.
Right guard is their biggest issue, and they know it. And they know that right guard is an issue for them. They have so many different reasons to believe that the play can be better from him and from the group overall. Last season, the Colts, 75.2% of their passes were true dropbacks. That was the 3rd highest rate in the league. Yeah, 75%. You're just putting it with a statue quarterback.
Yeah.
What you are asking of your offensive line there is so tough. The Eagles were at 55.8%. Those 29th in the NFL. So just that, you're making it so much easier on your offensive line. And that's before we even consider the mobility of the quarterback to make people miss in those situations. So I just think even if the line didn't have any outside additions, it's going to be better for structural reasons, for health reasons, and just the left tackle getting better in his second year.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
The last thing is the running game. The Colts running game last year was disgusting.
Yeah.
So
couldn't even get off the ground.
67 backs last year had at least 50 carries. The Colts backs ranked 56th, 60th, and 66th in EPA per rush. So Jonathan Taylor was bad last year, but everyone who got the ball for the Colts was bad last year. The Eagles on that same list of those 67 backs in EPA per rush, number 1 and number 9. Kenny Gainwell was number 1. Miles Sanders was number 9. If you tick up the rushes to 100, Miles Sanders led the NFL in EPA per rush among running backs. everything about this offense makes it easier on the players you want to make it easier for. It just wasn't like that last year. So I think it's going to be all over the place. I think it's going to be totally up and down. I think asking him to be a good passer right away is asking a lot. But I do think that so many things are lining up for the game to just be less hard for the NFL's worst offense from last season than it's going to be this year.
That's what it is. It's down the road. The ceiling could be something, but right now that floor just got lifted from absolute bottom tier floor. Like I'm the floor of floors. Like you can go any further to competency just because of just uptick what we're saying, the offensive line and a quarterback that uses legs. I mean, Jonathan Taylor has never played with a quarterback that can run. Like,
No.
you know, like I'm not calling Carson Wentz a runner. That's just chaos what he was doing. But a valid running attack, like with the quarterback using his legs, not crazy scrambling everywhere and throwing interceptions. So that's interesting because he's good out of the run or out of the shotgun or good under center. Some backs
he was worse in the gun. Even in the year where he was dominating, his efficiency numbers were worse out of the gun than they were under center.
First down success rate was like basically exactly the same.
I was looking at EPA. EPA, so I'm sure there's a lot of explosive plays that maybe
success rate was because my theory has always been that he was worse out of the gun, and then I looked up the numbers because I was with you on that. Because even at Wisconsin, they moved to the pistol because they wanted to look more under center. With some of their kind of their stuff, that's what the pistol does. It's gun and under center. You're kind of hybriding it, so that they got Paul Chryst to run pistol because they're like, well, let's make our running back look really good because he's a really good player. So I had the same theory though. I thought he was worse out of the gun, but it turned out success rate wise, he actually was about the same. So that's where I'm just curious. I just want to see what that looks like. He's never played with that type of guy. I'm hoping Ryan. It was so disappointing to watch that Colts offensive line last year. Just mentally, sometimes they just looked beaten down. Like they just looked they just looked mentally lazy at times where they weren't going to the right spot. The Jaguars game's the one that stands out to me early in the season, Jaguars game. So that's kind of like, I just think there's just gonna be a little bit more confidence there, just naturally regression to the mean. That's what I'm just hoping for there. And of course, Richardson's the get out of jail free card. I have Raymond for one of my answers, but the other answer. So I'll talk about him as well.
Last Jonathan Taylor point. This team, I think they've explicitly kind of said this. I don't know if it's been public, but I think this is kind of the vibe is that they're not paying anybody. Yeah. The guys that are up for extensions, Michael Pittman's going to be a free agent. They're not even going to be free agents. Like those guys are just up for extensions. They're not, I don't think they're handing out any money based on the season than what they did last year.
Right.
So Michael Pittman's another one of those guys. What does he look like within this offense? So I think there are a lot of questions of kind of how some of the old pieces from the old version of the Colts translate to this offense. And I think that the floor and the structure and everything else sets a lot of guys up to succeed. But there are questions about how it's all going to fit together because you're moving from one era into another era. And that is going to be their biggest question on that side of the ball.
Yeah. And I'm just, like I said, my original question for this question, I guess, was what do they think of their unit? What do they think of their personnel? It's a new regime. They didn't draft all these guys. So I think I really trust this head coach and really think he's a great offensive mind. So I really want to see just what he thinks. And that's why I'm going to be interested in watching the Colts every week.
What's the biggest question you have about their defense heading into the season? The Indianapolis Colts.
Can they cover anybody on the outside? That's first and foremost. I think this group can make it tough sledding on the ground for offenses and really throwing over the middle where the strength of this unit is. But you look at that depth chart or just look at who they have and can they cover anybody on the outside? You have Gus Bradley as your defensive coordinator, and they play single high, man or cover three, just basic numbers over 2/3 of their snaps. And that's going to require your corners to cover guys.
And even that's
lower than usual.
That's with him adapting a little bit. Last year, so in 2021, they played cover three on 73% of their early down snaps with the Raiders. 73%. That's awesome. Last year, they were down to 50%. That was the third highest rate in the league.
Yeah.
So that's with him even adapting to some of the things he used to do.
I looked up the same numbers because I remember in my head, I was like, oh, he changed what he did last year. And I was like, nope, still top three. still third. And so that's why I included the man coverage in there too, because it was like, well, let's show just how much single high that Gus Bradley likes to run. It's fun. We talked about how Derrick Henry is like a running back from yesteryear. It's like, also with like Gus Bradley calling plays, it's like, it's nice to look at a lens.
At least he's doing some different stuff. At least he was running more quarters on early downs and more cover two on third down. It's like, even that is a step in the right direction.
Way to go,
I'm with the corners and just the secondary in general is easily the biggest question because the front seven, they have At this stage of his career, DeForest Buckner is a good player. I don't think
Mhm.
he's the game record that he was a couple of years ago.
No.
So if you concede that, and you look at the rest of the guys they have up front, Grover Stewart's a good player. Samson Ebukam is a functional player who was in San Francisco last year. They signed as a free agent. Kwity Paye has been fine. He struggled to stay healthy. So that combined with Shaq Leonard being back at linebacker and being healthy, I think the front seven could be solid. But the problem is with this back end, you kind of need them to be excellent for this to be like a top 10-ish unit. They were good last year. This is a team that was like on the verge of being a top 10 sort of defense at times last season, like in the top 12. I think they finished 17th in weighted DVOA. But the guys who were their best players on the back end aren't on the team anymore.
Right.
Rodney McLeod played well for them last year. He's not here. Stephon Gilmore played well for them last year. He's not here. So you have Juju Brents, who they drafted in the second round. He hasn't been practicing. He just got back, I think, earlier this week. I think when I was there, maybe in his first or second day of practice. That would have been August 6th. So he missed most of the start of camp. Theoretically, he's a starting corner, but who knows? That he hasn't really played much. And on the other side, you got Daryl Baker, who's a street free agent who was on the practice squad for most of last year. He's been looked good. Apparently, he's got a lot of athleticism.
You compare any two names together, like
Daryl Baker and Dallas Flowers were both undrafted free agents from last year, and those guys are in the mix to be that other outside corner. And then Darius Rush, they drafted in the 5th round. So this secondary is just going to be hanging on for dear life. Julian Blackmon is a starter, but he's struggled to stay healthy. So even if Gus Bradley is competency personified on that side of the ball, where it's like, we're going to have the 17th best defense in football, that to me is even tough to talk yourself into with some of the youth they have at some of these secondary positions. But it's important to acknowledge that's where this team is. They traded Stephon Gilmore.
Yes.
They're no longer trying to squeeze everything they can out of every single roster. They're now in a place where they're moving on from Stephon Gilmore, not acquiring Stephon Gilmore.
Correct.
So even if their defense takes a step back, that's fine, because I think that's kind of where they are in their timeline.
It makes it so much easier to make some decisions when you kind of know that. Like, rather, don't have that gambler's fallacy with some things. Well, if it worked before, we got to do it again. Let's get another quarterback in here. Just resetting the clock and everyone's on the same timeline really helps. I know. And even like a guy like Kwity Paye, you hope he keeps ascending, but he's got to stay healthy. Like, notice a theme here with this defense. It's just, can this guy stay healthy? Well, maybe. Well, do they have a depth guy behind him? Not really. Like that, you can kind of like, maybe he'll shore it up. So that's where this unit is right now. They've lost some interesting guys. I agree with you. It's a front seven centric unit that I think is competent enough, but they have to defend the pass for 30 something times a game. That's just scary, especially you can just pepper outside throws to them. It's like their second round pick, Juju Brents, is a height, weight, speed guy. So usually those guys,
there's a lot of height, weight, speed guys on this defense. That's what they did this offseason.
Yes.
They rolled the dice on what they tried to do is they just traded back and back and back to try to recoup some of the draft capital that they'd lost, trading for veterans, trading for quarterbacks, and just made bets on athletes. That was the reset of the roster that they underwent.
Absolutely.
Now the athletes need to turn into players.
Yes. And that's what even their 4th round pick from Northwestern, Tommy Adebare, it's like, fun athlete, not a lot of production. Like he's just another guy that's like, of course he's a rookie, so don't get me wrong here, but I did like him as far as he's different than DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart. So it's a nice, that was a perfect match for him as far as team fit. I was a little worried at some of the teams that he was getting paired to. Zaire Franklin played well when Shaq Leonard was hurt.
Which makes you feel better about losing Okereke in free agency.
Correct.
So their front seven has some decent players in it, but no stars.
And the one DB I like is Ronnie Thomas. But the last time I gave him
rookie for them last year,
I gave him a shout out last year, and he got burned the next week, and so I never mentioned him again because I just instantly jinxed him, like instantly brought him up. And I you remember that? And you were like,
yes.
you're a lot. I think you texted me right away. And you're like, man, I was watching Ronnie Thomas, and of course something happened to him. So, but I do like him. I think he was from Yale. He's an interesting player. I think he's gonna be a
7th round rookie last season at safety. He's going to be a starter for them this year. And then they drafted Nick Cross in the 3rd round, who's another height, weight, speed guy at safety last season. And he's going to be, I think, maybe a rotational piece. They can do some different stuff personnel wise. So we talk about the front seven, and maybe there's a lot of good players. They don't have that many needle movers with DeForest Buckner being at the stage of his career. My X factor is Kwity Paye. Can he take a step forward, and can he be healthy? Can he be one of those guys where maybe he's like a really solid 1B rusher for you in a way that he hasn't been at this stage of his career? Because this is a theme in any team you talk about. The guys you invested in, they need to become difference makers.
Yes.
If you draft guys in the first round, even in the back half of the first round, they need to become difference makers for you eventually. You need to hit on those players at a certain rate in order to be a good NFL team. And the Colts just haven't really done that. Yep. They haven't found those types of players, or they've traded away picks for quarterbacks when they've been looking for those types of players. So you look at this roster in general, and since that 2018 hot streak that they went on, Pittman and Taylor are fine, but there haven't been that many other guys in those first couple of rounds that have become those types of needle moving players for them.
This isn't a revolutionary thought. I think it's just economics 101. It's that you have to have some guys outplay their draft spot and have to have some guys outplay their contracts. Like that's how you become winning teams, is along with having a damn good quarterback, is other guys have to outplay. That third round pick has to look like a steal. That's undrafted guy has to look like a steal. That guy that you sign on a 2-year deal has to be like, oh, wow, we really found a diamond in the rough there. So my X factor is Raymond. Is just they find a real legit left tackle. I'm glad you brought him up. Everything I said, actually, when I rewatched him, he was more solid than I remember. That was kind of I'm glad you brought up the second half of the year, but it'd be a huge win for this team that's been trying to figure out that position. We talked about quarterback, but left tackle has been a spot of them trying to figure out a guy that can stick there. They had Eric Fisher there for a little bit. So I think that he's my X factor, because I think if they figured out, even if he's just solid, that would just make you feel a lot better about where the projection of this line's going.
We talk about the Andrew Luck retirement being something that kind of knocked this team on its ass. The Anthony Costanzo retirement also kind of knocked this team on its ass. They've been struggling to find a guy there. I have faith. And again, it's that time of year. It's August.
I like them coming out.
Everyone is excited about everyone, but I think they're pretty happy with where he is in his development.
That's good to hear.
So I think that that's why he's my breakout player candidate. I think he was a fantastic tester. I mean, he's a really good athlete, even as an older prospect. He's from Germany or Austria, I want to say. I mean, he came to football late. So he's actually a year and a half older than Andrew Thomas, who just signed that extension, which isn't good. You don't want to bet on those sorts of prospects, but he is an athlete. Yes. So it's not like he's a low ceiling guy because he has the traits. He just came into the league a little bit older. So I think he has the movement skills. It was just about strength, and he has really remade his body. And again, was much better in the second half of last year than he was early. So I think he has a chance to be like an above average NFL left tackle by the end of the season.
And I think that's very fair. Like I said, I liked him coming in, and he's a late bloomer, and doesn't like offensive line is just such a tricky thing. There's only so many guys that can play these spots. You got to find them everywhere. So my breakout guy, and I'm very proud of myself that I haven't mentioned his name yet, and that's Alec Pierce. It's got to be my guy, but jokingly and not jokingly, like seriously, I know I was high on him going in the draft process. I just think his synergy and skill set matches with Anthony Richardson to a T. I think it is. I think those two are going to make some magic together. I really do. This guy not everyone can watch all 22 and everything, but there's a lot of YouTube stuff out there now, which is great. Go find this, just Google search it. YouTube, all targets Alec Pierce, and then count. It's going to take more than two hands. How many times he wins on a go ball and Matt Ryan is throwing it 5 yards behind him and he has to play defense and knock the ball down. Now you got a guy that can throw it legitimately like 80 yards with a guy that wins time and time again on vertical routes. So I looked it up on SIS, on Sports Info Solutions. So on go corners, posts, and fade routes last year. So true vertical routes. Pierce had the same yards per route run on those as Jamar Chase, Christian Watson, and Mike Evans. He even rated higher than George Pickens, who's like everybody's favorite second-year breakout guy. And this is what Matt Ryan's like zombie arm that could barely even get the ball there. He didn't rank too high in successful targets per route, but it was still higher than George Pickens. And I mentioned all these on our fantasy football show. So I'm kind of continuing this like kind of trend of talking about him. But I just think what the back shoulders, I'm not saying this guy's going to be like a top 10, top 15 guy, but I think he's going to be a legit where you're like, wow, he's explosive. We're going to see some highlights from Alec Pierce. He might be that kind of, 800 and something yard guy, but it's like, on 40, 50 catches where it's just all vertical. It's like he averages 18, 20 yards a catch. But I think now you have a quarterback that's willing to give him chances. And I'm excited to see what they do in the red zone. I think he can dunk on guys. He's a great back shoulder catcher. So I just think that their synergy is going to be something I'm really excited to watch. And I'm very optimistic about it.
All right. Over under on the Colts. 6.5 is their over under right now. Where are you going?
I can't believe this. I took the over on them. It's a bet on the coach. It's a bet on the ascension in the second half of the year. That's and a very easy schedule, by the way. one of the 5 easiest schedules in the league, depending on how you break it down.
Yeah, I mean, they play the NFC South, they play the AFC South. Those are both divisions you want to be playing. I'm going under. We got to pick some that are under.
Have to.
That's how I was feeling about it, and I just think it's going to be so scattershot and just so all over the place. Like the line, if you look at the end of the season, like their efficiency per game on offense, I think it's just going to be like a squiggly line. It's going to look like an EKG.
The Football Outsiders variance, like
yes,
it's gonna be 32nd.
That's okay. You just want to get to the end of the season, and you just want to feel good about them. Again, that conscious step back on defense. Pay attention to that stuff. They know they're taking a half step back this year. All that matters is, does the quarterback show you enough flashes? So if you win 6 games and you have a top 5 pick, and you're picking fucking Marvin Harrison, and you drop that, that's fine. Like, don't worry about it, Colts fans. Don't worry. If you win 5 games this year and that guy looks like a dude, none of this matters.
And we haven't talked about this, but this is an awesome offensive tackle draft too. It's so you might shore that up as well. Even if Raymond's decent, it's like there's some awesome dudes in this tackle class as well.